Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. This is the BPD Symptoms series, part 2 of our discussion on suicide. If you have not listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend you do that. Just go back and listen. In that episode, we talked a lot about the language around suicide, the stigma around suicide, and started to get into some of our personal stories, starting with Shannon's, around suicide attempts and what that's meant in our lives. In this episode, we'll focus a little bit more on those personal stories and experiences. We'll also talk through protective factors and how we stay alive today. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Make sure you take care of yourself. Of course, suicide is a challenging topic. Many people who have listened to this podcast probably think about suicide on a very regular basis, and that is totally normal. But it can be tough, and it's hard for us to give a trigger warning for everything that we say throughout the episode. So please take care of yourself. Make sure that you look in the show notes for some additional resources. Call your crisis lines if you need to. Talk to a friend. One of the most important things that we talk about in this episode is about the power of connection. So make sure that you're connected to others around you, even if it's just a person in a coffee shop that you can say hi to when you go get your mocha. Any connection is important connection. Enjoy the episode. I guess I want to talk a little bit about, we've heard a little bit about Shannon attempting suicide and then trying to recover from that. Is there anybody else who has a specific attempt or a set of attempts that they wanted to talk about today?
I don't mind going. After I left my marriage, it was quite strange because it was quite an elated time, but it was also like I had come straight out of a lot of abuse in my sort of childhood and teens to an abusive relationship to like just being my own person. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. There was like one particular time, and like that whole relationship was full of like attempts and very dangerous situations that I was put in by them. So it was always kind of on the radar, and it actually always has been since I was about 7. And it wasn't the first time I had attempted that night either. But yeah, I got more and more kind of distressed through the day. Like I'd gone to see Women's Aid, and I'd been to see my solicitor to put like the date down for separation and stuff like that. And then I was AWOL for 2 days. And it was just that strangeness of, and it does come back to plurality because everything kind of does at the moment. I won't go into methods. It's kind of hard to describe otherwise. But like basically I was really, really close and just kind of kept having thoughts about like the things that had happened that were amazing since the last time I had wanted to attempt. And I'm like, I'm really glad that I didn't that time. And then it was like hours of that, like back and forth of like, nope, right now. And then like, but what about this? And then I ended up going back to my car at like 4 a.m. and sleeping in the car. And then the next day I had like literally like a 10-hour conversation with one of my best friends because I think she just rang, or maybe we were messaging anyway, but I told her and she was like, right, I'm here for you, like however long we need. And that conversation, and then obviously I had to go back to where I was living, but that was kind of the 2 nights later. And then some people were really angry that I'd been AWOL and had thought about that, and other people were really nice. But that kind of knife edgeness of that time and how close it was is kind of really helpful now, because it's something that I think about probably daily. I have thoughts of suicide and little kind of suggestions in my mind, and I'll want to self-harm a lot as well, which is separate for me. But yeah, thinking about that is kind of almost self-protective because it reminds me of the things that I thought of then and the things that have happened since then that I'm really glad have happened, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I like that kind of mentality, right? Of had this happened before, these things wouldn't have happened. Easier said than done.
Yeah, no, because like I attempted a lot as a child and a teenager. And I was actually just in the first part of my assessment the other day for DID. Mm-hmm. And
dissociative identity disorder, if anybody's wondering.
Sorry, yes.
It's okay. I always try and say the acronyms at least once.
You're very good at it. It's great. And I was just like, she was like, when did you first attempt suicide? And I was like, oh, I was about 10 when I actually first attempted. She just caught my language and it's like you were saying earlier about failed. Like I just went, oh, it didn't work. And then she was like, because you were 10. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, okay. And but it's kind of been an ever-present kind of thing for me.
Yeah, totally. Anyone else with like specific? I know, Shane, you were kind of saying yours is a little bit more like kind of in the background. Dave, anything from you?
Yeah, sure.
If you want, obviously, I'm not forcing anybody to talk about their worst day of their life.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, so I've had 2 hospital experiences, and, one of the things about my 2 experiences is that I did them completely alone, like just all by myself, and although I should say not completely by myself, but with the help of a really good, my therapist I've had for the last 3 years, and if anything good came out of them, it was that, especially after the first time, then the second time, I felt so much comfortable just like taking care of myself and like, like noticing what's going on. So if anything good came out of it, that was something. I think one of the things that I've noticed about my attempt is that I have a belief that it turns out is correct, that like if I told anyone that I was feeling suicidal, much less that I was going to attempt or anything like that, the only response I would get is they would get like angry at me, for being selfish or all kinds of stuff like that, and that it wouldn't be a good idea. So I never did that. And so when I had an actual attempt, my wife at the time had like 13, 14, 15 prescriptions she was actively taking. Rather than take just, a bottle of one of them, I took a bunch from each of them. And my thinking was that way, if I didn't succeed, then maybe she wouldn't know I took her pills, because she would mostly be angry at me that I had taken her pill.
That says a lot about your marriage.
Yeah, I wasn't doing it consciously, but my brain was set up to think ahead of like, man, like the last thing, if you don't succeed here, the last thing you want is for to find out about it. You know what I mean? And so we're going to do what we have to do to hide this. Of course, in the end, but when I woke up, it was obvious, because like my muscles didn't work. I couldn't stand up, like I couldn't like talk. My mouth was all like jelly. And I hiccuped for 3 days. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop hiccuping for 3.
Weird.
So it was pretty obvious. And yeah, she was angry at me about the pill. He left on a work trip the next day that had been planned, but it wasn't like necessary. And then I was talking to my therapist, and she was like, "Oh, you haven't been to the hospital? You got to go and get checked out." So it was a little bit of a different scenario, but it was just weird to be. It was weird to be in that situation where there was somebody who I thought I was really close to, who was just like mostly angry because of like the effect it was having on her. But I'm trying to think. The second time, I just knew that I had to go to the hospital, and I got in an Uber and went by myself, and that was a really positive experience. A lot of good things came out of that. Yeah, it's been something I think it's been something that I've struggled with my whole life. And I think that the one thing that's helped is that I have this therapist that I can talk to about it, that like, that there's a forum like this where people can talk about it, because part of what was driving the feelings, I think, was this feeling that like I really couldn't reveal the extent of like the pain that was going on inside,
Totally. Yeah.
By the way, I did have one more, which is sort of connected to what came up earlier, but I just wanted to mention it. My son, who, when he went into 6th grade, all of a sudden he was on all these WhatsApp chats. And so, my wife and I, we would like monitor his chats a little bit. And there was like this one chat where there was this kid on it who was a 6th grader who like, it was like, I'm going to kill myself now. I'm going to hurt myself, getting like real explicit and like not getting any attention for it, but just like constantly. And I really went around and around about what to do about it, whether I should like report it. This kid didn't have parents who like, talking to them wasn't going to be helpful. But I really went around and around on whether to report it to the school counselor. And I think in the end I did, and I don't think they did anything. Of course, they didn't contact you or anything. I had totally forgotten about that. And then Shane, you were talking about people talking about they're having chats where there's a lot of blowing off steam or things like that. It was interesting to see it from a kid who's like 10 or 11.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to get more and more common too, because people are they're having more access to like these ideas. Shane's hands first and then Kat.
I just wanted to say, Dave, back to your point about people getting angry when you talk about it, I just don't understand it. Like, why do people get upset with you when you tell them that this huge thing? I can't wrap my head around it.
I mean, I'll say this, which that I think, without going into the whole thing, it was an extremely abusive marriage. And when I went to the hospital and I said that I was there mostly because because I was in an abusive relationship, a doctor and a nurse both asked me, which one, like, were you the abuser or the abuse? Which was nice. I wasn't like coherent enough to care.
Especially as a guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, people just assume that the man's
Used
the
relationship.
So
which one were you? Like, yeah, but no. So look, I think in my case it's very simple, which is that, like, if you have an abusive spouse where everything has to be all about them, and then all of a sudden, I mean, someone committing suicide or being very serious about it, that's like the ultimate trump card. Like, there is nothing more serious than that, I don't think. And so if an abusive spouse, I think, can get threatened by the oxygen getting sucked out of the room of all of a sudden, no, like, I might have to care for this person, but this person, I have a role where, like, I'm supposed to be helping them, but this person is, like, beneath me, and it's supposed to be about me. It's not allowed to be about them. So that's my theory.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also just like fear. They have no idea what to do. It's desperation. Maybe not in your situation, Dave, but I think in general.
He was very worried that anybody was going to find out. So, like, she had gone out of town and I was in the hospital, and, like, the kids had to be picked up from school. I went into the Minute Clinic and told them about it, and they were like, oh, you got to get on an ambulance and go to the hospital. So all of a sudden I'm, like, realizing I'm not going to be able to pick up my kids. So, calling, and she's just, like, angering me about what it's going to cost us for me to have gone. And I'm trying to get her to focus on getting the kids picked up. And she's upset about that too. And I was like, well, just call, A, B, or C, or D person and have them pick up the kids. And she was like, no, like, nobody can find out about this. We'll lose all of our friends. Like, I can't have anybody pick up the kids. And that was, like, one of the main things where like a light bulb went on. And I was like, this is not a healthy relationship.
Truly.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's wild.
But, it was like a very big thing that happened for me.
I wanted to add that I didn't talk to anyone about it because I didn't want anyone to stop me. And in saying that, because I didn't know that I had BPD before my suicide attempt, I didn't have the vocabulary around those feelings that I do have now. But I did have a girlfriend who I had spoke to and said that sometimes I had pretty dark thoughts. And she gave me the most beautiful gift and said, if you ever get there, like, have you got a plan? That was a great question to ask, I thought. Have you got a plan in place? Yes, I have. And I ruminated on that plan for years and years and years, but I didn't ever think I would get there. It was a release to be able to think about that, and there was an option if I couldn't stay. But she gave me a really beautiful gift and said to me, if you ever find yourself in that place, I want you to call me and I will come and sit with you and we'll talk about this. And if there's some holes in your plan, I'll point them out. And if not, I will leave you and you can do what you need to do. However, I can be a friend to you in that space. And I need to acknowledge that. That was a pretty incredible gift that she had given me, and I didn't take it. And I think that that is a big point here. Like, when I made the decision, that decision was made, everything was in place, and I was going through the motions within minutes.
And that is a sign. A lot of the time people will say, like, I didn't know that the risk was so high because they were suddenly, like, they seemed so happy. They seemed so content. And that's actually one of the signs of potential suicide attempt, is that you are feeling really good and happy and you're just good to go because your out is finally here and you know what your plan is. And that's where, like, sometimes it can be really hard when you're trying to predict suicide and you're trying to address it is that oftentimes when somebody is saying something to you about suicide, it means that they want somebody to stop them. Which again, it doesn't mean that you should discredit it when people tell you that they want to die by suicide, but it does mean that like sometimes it's the people who don't say anything that are actually the biggest risk. And that was in my situation in this last summer, which like there's an episode all about that situation, but like it was the first time in my life where I wasn't telling anyone. And that was when I knew that like this is a lot worse than when I would tell people, because I had no interest in anybody stopping me at all. Could not care less. Yeah. I guess I'll talk a little bit about my own kind of experience with the symptom. I'm really bad at it. So in a way that's a good thing, because I have not had any like quote unquote like major attempts that have landed me in the hospital with any physical damage, that kind of thing. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Maybe I'm just a scaredy cat. I'm not sure. But I'm really, really afraid of it not working. There is nothing that scares me more than I'm not going to use that word. There's nothing that scares me more than not being able to complete a suicide attempt correctly, for lack of a better word, because I do not want to have the physical repercussions of any of the methods that I would attempt. And there is some interesting stats, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but around the lethality of methods that men and women use. And so men attempt suicide much less frequently, but they die by suicide more because the methods that they choose are more lethal. And as a woman, I've always been more drawn to the more lethal attempts. And I'm also always afraid of hurting others in the attempt. So like a huge component of my crisis last year was like, how can I make it so that I don't psychologically fuck anybody else up? Which is ironic because of course they're going to be psychologically fucked up. But like part of my plan is like put a sticky note on the door that says, Erin, don't come inside, call 911, do not come inside, right? Something like that. I am very thankful that I don't have firearms anywhere near me, because I think had I had firearms in my house at any point in my life, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because that is a very lethal method. It does not always work though. So keep that in mind, that if you fuck that one up, your life's going to get a hell of a lot worse. And it's to the point where like, you know, Aaron used to hunt before he met me, and because I don't do anything fun or outdoorsy, and it freaks me out. Hunting freaks me out. But he has a gun license. It is a non-negotiable that there are not firearms in our house. I do not care what you're using them for. I don't care that they're locked up in a safe that I don't have access to. There will never be guns in my house ever, period, point blank. You know, when his dad dies, I'm sure he would presumably get his dad's hunting stuff. That is, I will leave. And we've had that conversation a million times. And he is like kind of fine with it, I guess. Like I think he's like, this is stupid. They're going to be locked up. I obviously take care of them effectively or whatever. And I'm like, no, because if this ever had been an option in my life, we would not be here. And so that's like a hard rule for me. And I have done some stupid things to try and die over the years that weren't very effective. And I think there are a few that have caused some lasting issues for me that I'm not going to get into because of insurance reasons. Maybe I'll just put this on Patreon or something. If the insurance provider wants to pay for it, they're more than welcome to. When I was studying like undergrad psych, we learned about like the parts of the brain. And we learned about like the brainstem and how that affects like all of your things. And if your brainstem dies, then you die. And so I tried to smash my brainstem in, and didn't work. But since as long as I can remember as an adult, I have had horrible chronic pain in my neck. I have like a weird neck twitch thing that you've probably noticed that I can't stop. And every time I go to any sort of like physio, chiro, acupuncture, massage, anyone, they go, holy fuck, have you been in a really bad car accident? And I'm like, no, I've never been in a car accident. And they're like, okay, well, your body is like messed up. Like there is something going very wrong in your neck and your shoulders. And the only thing I can think of is that was probably when I tried to smash my brainstem in, which would make sense. So there are repercussions of some of the things that I've tried. And thankfully, I haven't done it. I also am a very big supporter of the concept of medical assistance in dying, or every country has a different way of wording it, but death by suicide, or sorry, not death by suicide, doctor-assisted suicide, euthanasia. I can't remember what it's called in Australia, Shannon.
I think it's still just classed as euthanasia here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
or medical assisted death maybe
yes, that's what it
be
is.
the common term now.
Yeah, that's what it is. I'm actually a huge proponent of that because I think, and there's obviously issues with it. I mean, there's a Patreon episode that's like an hour and a half about this that we do a big, long, deep dive into it. Shannon's podcast episode just came out. I just got a notification. I think that people should be allowed to die with dignity and without harming their friends, family, whatever, if they want to. And I think there needs to be precautions in place to obviously make that not like a snap decision, I want to die today. But I think that the fact that our systems fail us so much that the only option is death, and the way that we have to die is hidden, secretive, shameful, stigmatized, hurtful to others, is disgusting. And I think that, if we had uncurable cancer and we would be able to have support in dying in a healthy way with our family surrounding us, that should be the same for people who have significant mental health challenges. I don't think everybody should do it. Right? I think there has to be a lot of things in place, but I really don't think that anybody should have to die in a way that's so alone and shameful because we have mental illness instead of physical illness. Yeah, Kat.
Okay, I have 3 points now. As assisted dying, there's a lot of, so I'm quite involved in a lot of kind of disability stuff at the moment because we've had a lot of political stuff in the UK around disabilities and benefits and work and all of that kind of stuff. And also the assisted dying bill has just gone through recently. And there's a lot of concern in those sort of disability activist spaces around the opportunity of coercion for people who are disabled, who are then being recommended for assisted dying rather than actual care. And there's a big thing around, assist us to live, don't assist us to die. So that
totally
something that I agree that there should be a way for it to be done. So, but I think there's a lot of complications and a lot of kind of societal things. And actually, I was just reading something about Canada and how a lot of disabled people, like an increase of I think it was 5%, but whatever, of disabled people are dying through that assisted dying sort of program more than were before. And there's a lot around it, but
and totally. And I do not want to acknowledge. I do not want to diminish the importance of that conversation and how it is not a one-stop quick fix. Believe me, I have been interested in this topic for 15 years. I am not one to say it's a super simple option, but I do believe that with the right precautions in place, it is something that we should be allowed to choose without being coerced into it.
Yeah, I'm mostly on that side of it. But yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up, just to kind of call back to what Dave said. And I've been in similar situations where I shared with my spouse at the time how I was feeling, and she was furious, absolutely furious. Several times I've been attempting, and it's just, you're so selfish. Everything is about you. Why would you, how dare you do that? You're causing such a drama. Your trauma is nothing, all of that. So yeah, and then I just kind of wanted to come back to kind of the cultural kind of general view of things, because I lived in London for full time for 2 years, but then 5 years kind of between there and Liverpool. And in London, regularly there will be the trains will be late or delayed or cancelled because somebody has jumped in front of one. And the attitude of the general public around that, and being in that environment when I was very, very suicidal, and just hearing the responses of it's so selfish, how dare they, why would they do that, they don't care about anyone else.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you do that when it's not rush hour? We get that on the bridges here too. Like, how could you do that in the middle of rush hour? I'm going to be late for work. Really? Fuck off.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and like on train stations, like there was only one time that someone checked if I was okay. I spent a lot of time in train stations just like, and there were loads of messed up stuff, like again with the relationship, like where there were situations where sometimes I would be trying and sometimes I would be being pushed. But anyway, it's a trains are a thing.
Wow. Yeah, and to see other people's reaction it's so heartless. It's so fucking heartless. And it happens all the time. I'm sure it happens all over the world because I know we experience that here with bridges and our SkyTrain system, which is like our subway equivalent.
I had a friend afterwards who called in to see me after I got home from hospital. I think I was there 5 weeks the first time. And we're going to use the dialectics in this because I want to be able to validate her feelings. And I believe that she may have had a parent who had been suicidal at some point. And the other part of it is that she was also very close to my daughter. But she screamed at me, how could you be so selfish? How could you do this to your children? It was the first time, because in hospital I was surrounded by people who really got it. And I had a partner who really got it. And I didn't have to have conversations with anyone outside of those people for 5 weeks. And I got home and this was sort of like one of the first interactions with the real world where she called in to see me, but it was to tell me that I was selfish and that my actions would have fucked up my kids' lives forever, ever, and I don't deserve to be their mum. And I want to validate her feelings in that because as a child who had a parent who had attempted suicide, her feelings are as valid as what my feelings were in that situation. They just weren't incredibly helpful.
It would have fucked up your kid's life forever.
It would have.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Attempting it did, Laurie.
Yeah,
like you saying before about the consequences of not succeeding.
Yeah.
They are fucking real.
Yeah.
But
it's still not a helpful conversation because there's no rational human being on earth that is trying to do this.
No. And I was put in that situation of trying to validate my choices to her. And I didn't even know, I couldn't validate them to myself at that time. And everything was so clouded in shame. It was really difficult. And I think it's something that I will work on for the rest of my life is forgiving myself for putting the people that I love in that situation. And I think it's also, well, it's part of my crisis plan is to remember what that feeling is like when it doesn't work and the work that you have to do to get through that. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw that in when we were talking about the inconvenience of it. What I caused was not inconvenience. It was true trauma. And I can sit with that because the people that I love can see where I was, and my way to repay them for putting them in that position is to just continue to work so hard so I don't get back there again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think suicide is one of the most devastating things in the world for any human. And it's devastating for the person who did it, and they would never have done it if they hadn't thought that it was their only option. And I truly believe that. And it's also devastating for all of those around them because that guilt will stick with you forever. What could I have done had I answered the phone? Could I have asked more clearly? Could I have whatever? And unfortunately, like, this is life, and it's awful and it's devastating. And it's, for people with borderline, it's very common. And I know that there are probably super feelers that we all know and love that have, sometimes when people stop coming to the super feelers club, it's a drop in and they just drop off the face of the earth, and I worry about them every day because I don't know. And there's no way for me to find out, And I hope that they just all, are living in a rainbow salad somewhere, living their best life. But realistically, 1 in 10 people die by suicide with our disorder. And those stats aren't good, but none of you none of you 4 better ever be that, or else I will come and get you. I'll haunt you. There's so much to talk about, and we didn't even really talk about self-harm at all. So we might want to do a separate episode about that, because I think that's another issue that people really don't understand. And it is both tied to suicide and completely different to suicide, in my opinion. But I also want to just talk a little bit, maybe while you guys all think about your... Normally we talk about skills, but I don't even know if skills in this situation are like the most useful, because I think at the point that you're dying by suicide, skills are almost not useful. If they are,
the definition of a skill breakdown point.
Yeah, like it's skills are to get you to never get to that point. But I want to talk about 2 things. One is, please, if you are ever wondering or talking to someone who you think might be suicidal, please ask them. There is no research out there that says that asking somebody about suicide when they're not suicidal will give them the idea of dying by suicide. And that is a huge misnomer. It is something that is very, again, taboo to talk about. And so people just don't do it. And there's a lot of good trainings out there that you can take, ranging from like 90 minutes to like days, where you can learn to how to have conversations about suicide. There's some particularly good ones, like Safe Talk is, I think, an international one, and it's quite good. And it's really just about learning how to ask the questions without being afraid for your own self, basically. So I'll link some of those in the chat or in the show notes, because I do think it's important. But there's also, I want to talk about what the risk factors are, and then also protective factors of suicide, because to me, there's this kind of push now to talk more about the protective factors and what a lot of people call life promotion. So it's not suicide prevention, it's life promotion, and trying to find reasons that people stay alive rather than try and not force them to, trying to keep them away from dying by suicide. So some of the risk factors, of course, things will vary, but just in case anybody's wondering, having prior suicide attempts is a big risk factor. Drugs and alcohol, risk factor. Mood disorders, mental disorders in general, BPD obviously being one of them, but even bipolar, when people are switching between the 2 poles of bipolar, can be a particularly challenging time. Access to lethal means. So this is like why I don't allow firearms in my house. And I also have a very intentionally not allowed things that I used to self-harm with regularly in my house. I have a pretty good rule about that. Same with like hoarding pills, right? If you don't have to hoard pills, don't. So I had a lot of old blood pressure medication last year on me because I have my heart condition, and I just brought them back to the pharmacy and said, hello, I don't need these anymore, and gave all my, and that was I did not enjoy doing that because I really liked having that safety net, but now I don't have them. So it's a lot harder to access. A family history of people that have died by suicide is a risk factor as well. Same with people around you. Suicide contagion is a fascinating topic as well that we're not going to get into today, but it's a very interesting one. Social isolation, chronic disease and disability, which I totally understand. I think nowadays, the days where I'm the most suicidal are actually because of my chronic pain, not because of my mental health, because it's like, I don't know how I can live with this. And then lack of access to care, which obviously is a big, huge issue that we've talked about here. And then there's other like factors. So people might be more likely to die by suicide or attempt suicide when they've just ended a relationship, when somebody's died, they're in serious financial problems. I think all of those are kind of clear, and things that people with BPD also experience more often and more intensely. So that makes sense. But protective factors, which I think are super important, is good healthcare. Obviously, that is easier said than done in a lot of places. So the opposite of social isolation. Life skills, again, DBT skills would be huge here because you're trying to deal with your life problems before they get to a point where it feels like there's no return. Purpose and meaning in life, I think, is super important. So like having something that you're passionate about, having something that you care about deeply, I think is one of the main ones that we can help. We can help people find their thing, right? And if we can help people find, whether it's advocacy or art or poetry or sports or whatever it is, they're more likely to feel like they can continue with life because they have a higher mission to do. And then the funny protective factor, given the culture conversation that we had earlier, and it does make sense that it's a protective factor, is religious or personal beliefs or cultural beliefs about suicide being wrong and that discourage it. So it's funny because you've got two sides of the same coin. Of one is like these cultural and religious beliefs about suicide are absolutely horrible when somebody has died by suicide and they're then treated like this kind of toxic sin of a person, but they also can help prevent suicide. So dialectics, baby. Dialectics for all. And I also think that it goes to show that the people who do die by suicide and do live in those cultures and religions and have those personal beliefs, to me, that is even more devastating, because it's like they had to overcome that and know that these are potentially going to be how you're considered for the rest of your life. So those are kind of the like classic, a little snippet of like what people would consider risk and protective factors. But maybe to close us out, we can talk about our own protective factors / why we stay alive / if there's any skills that you think are particularly beneficial for you when it comes to suicide and trying to not go that route. Anybody want to start?
Yeah, I once had someone openly just say, well, that's not good enough, about one of my protective factors. Because basically I had someone who was my therapist. It's a whole other story. But like, and during that time, part of my safety plan was if I was, I don't want to say serious, like if I was feeling that bad, then I would tell her and we would have a conversation. And I said, well, I made this promise. And the other person then just turned around and went, well, that's not good enough. You need to say something else. So that wasn't great. Yeah, I sort of have that with someone else now. I like found family where it's like I would talk to her. But also my dogs are a big one, and my pet. Mm-hmm. Because like they need me, and it's like, well, it would take a lot of organization. And I have gone all the way down that road and been like, well, how could I like make sure someone was there for them without them realizing what was happening? But yeah, and like sometimes I massively resent that. It's like, why do I have them? Because then they like remove that, like you said, remove that outlet. Mm-hmm. So that's a weird kind of feeling about like resenting everything I love because
resenting your protective factors. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, so my dogs, and yeah, like the work I do with horses is a big one. Poetry is a big one. Like I'm like planning my new book and stuff, and that seems like something that I have to share. That seems important. And in terms of like skills, it's not really, well, it kind of is, but like connection. Like I have, I have called helplines a lot, and I walk. If I'm really struggling, I walk a lot, and like I've walked all night before. And I used to drive around a lot in like when I was in my relationship, but I don't drive around as much anymore. It's a weird ride.
There's so many of yours that are related to animals. It's kind of beautiful. You can tell where your heart really lies.
I have a million reasons to stay alive now. So many to list. And when you were saying, Laurie, before about finding something that you're passionate about and invested in, that when we were talking about diversional therapy before, I think that's the start, is trying to find those things that bring you a sense of awe and joy. And I have a lot of those. But the dialectics of this situation is that sometimes I feel suicidal, regardless of those things. And I think the best way for me to treat that is as if it is a terminal illness. And we talk about it the same way somebody would talk about it who had diabetes or, epilepsy.
Chronic illness, not terminal illness. Different things.
Yeah. No.
Well, I guess similar. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And I have those things in place now. I know what I need to keep myself well, and I need to act prior to the point where I have lost interest in all of those things, because I now know about myself that if I wait, it's too late. So I have to act before I get there. And I'm very lucky to be surrounded by some incredible people. And I'm going to say some, because there's still a lot of people in the world who aren't comfortable about having a conversation around suicide. I guess I'd really love to be a part of that changing.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know,
think you
being
are.
here with you guys is a big part of that. And it is something that I feel passionate about, and it's a drive. And being here with you guys is a reason to stay alive. I can't imagine in those weeks after my suicide attempt being here, having a conversation with 4 other humans who I adore about this very thing and not feeling shame about it. I am so far away from there. And for anyone who is listening to this and thinks that it's the right choice, there is so much on the other side of that. All of us are living proof. And every day is not easy, but there are so many times where something happens and I think, I might not have been here for this. And I take those moments and I put them in a little jar. And when I need to, I can pull those out and remember them, because I wouldn't give up the experiences that I've had for anything here today. And I know that if I get back to that place, there will be a time in the future where I will feel the exact same way, that I wouldn't give up those experiences for anything.
Love you, Shannon.
Man, what do I want to say here? There's so much I feel like I want to say, but to narrow it down, I think connection has been so huge for me. I've been having thoughts of suicide since the age of 12, but it got really bad when I was living out in Oregon, so a couple years ago. And if it weren't for my cat Cheeto, I really wouldn't be here. The thought, I mean, wow, even just talking about it now just makes me emotional, but like the thought of leaving her without, me being here, I just couldn't do it because I just love her so much. So I would have to say connection is really big for me. And I think also like my thoughts of suicide, like I said, are very passive, and I just like don't really want to take care of myself. So I do a lot of opposite action when I have really bad like suicidal days. Basically, like my goal is just self-care. Like all I have to do that day if I'm feeling suicidal is just brush my teeth, wash my face, eat. And that's it. That's my only expectation that I set for myself. So yeah, that's all I got.
I love that, Shane. I think that's so important to take away all the other expectations, because I think sometimes, to me, the expectations of the world are actually what causes part of the problem.
Just wanted to call back to, like, I'm really glad you brought up the point about not talking about it or talking about it and asking the questions, because I'm sure you know that like there is research around if people talk about it, it's less likely to happen, and it's less likely to actually volunteer in a position where I speak to a lot of suicidal people. And I think part of that gives me purpose. I understand where they are, and I feel so honored to be in that space with them, even if that means being with them, like not physically, but like being there connected as a human while they die. Like, it is such an honor to be in that space and to have that opportunity to find out what that purpose, what that wonder is for them. And I think, yes, that gives me purpose, but also there's an element of when you're immersed in finding the wonder for other people and in affirming to them the value of their lives, like, it reminds me that maybe mine is worth something too.
Beautifully said, Kat.
Yeah, and like people aren't used to talking about it. Like when we were training for that, like there's some training that is just talking about myths about suicide and beliefs about dying, and a lot of people drop out that week because they're just not used to talking about dying at all, like let alone suicide. But hopefully that will be changing, gradually.
I hope so too. Yeah, it's an uncomfortable topic, but it's an important one. The more we talk about it, the less uncomfortable it gets, right? Dave, how about you? Protective factors, things you live for?
I'm realizing I look way more like Homer Simpson than I realized I did.
That's the opposite of a reason to live. No, I'm just kidding. You do not look like Homer Simpson at all. You're the cutest Homer Simpson I've ever seen, Dave.
You got Homer Simpson with like an Ozempic neck, but other than that, I don't know. When I search my heart, I can't find the feelings that you guys described. Like I can't find I just feel a lot of emptiness, which is a sign that like I need to be careful, because that's sort of how it starts. I think that, the times that I felt the worst and that I had the most serious attempts were ones where there was no weighing. It wasn't like, oh yeah, like I'll like miss my kids or like they'll be hurt or something. I was just, my mind had convinced me. I was fully convinced that like when I was gone, life would just continue for everyone. Some people would be like, that guy, I guess he's gone, or you know what I mean. Basically, but like nobody would care at all, and so it made the choice really easy to go forward when it feels like, probably my kids will be happier, and like not feeling sorry for myself, but like actually feeling that way. Like they're not going to notice, and like and they'll probably be happier because they're not being raised by me. And so that's where, I think I realized, and someone said this earlier, I didn't like it, that like with these things, you can think you're right near the shore. And all of a sudden you look around and you're in like some very deep water. And so I think one thing that I figured out is that I have a crisis plan. And like, as part of that, I have sort of like different benchmarks where it's like, if my mind starts thinking about this, I'm going to text this person and just like let them know. Or like, if my mind starts to think about actual like methods, I'm going to immediately call my therapist and let her know that. And I think that number one, it means that like you're bringing someone else in to the mental conversation that's just happening in my head. But also it's like, I think there has been an effect then when I've sort of reached some of those steps and done what I said I would do, where, I don't have a long conversation with the person or whatever, but them just being like, all right, message received. Like, I understand that things are serious. And just having that interaction with the person, I think has done sometimes something to just back me back off that, like, nobody's going to notice if I'm gone kind of situation. Because all of a sudden there is this person. So, if there is someone you trust or someone who is helpful, I think setting up a crisis plan in particular, knowing the sort of like steps that you go through in your mental descent ladder and setting up real clear things that you have to do in each case has been a big one for me.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I appreciate your honesty there a lot. And I also know that you've had kind of a weird week just because we were texting earlier this week.
I'm fine, by the way. Like,
and I wonder...
I'm not saying that. Just so you know, like I'm completely safe. Like this is not like a crisis point. It was describing more of a general feeling. So it has been a weird week though.
No, totally. It has been a weird week. It has definitely been a weird week. And also, like, I think this is good modeling of like, first of all, we care about you more than anything in the world. And if you were to ever die, we would both be absolutely devastated and very mad at you. But mostly devastated. And like, there's hundreds of other people that listen to this every week that feel the same way. And even if, right now you can't find that thing inside of you that like is keeping you here, please know that you are loved by so many human beings in the entire world. And like, that will never, ever change. So, I hear you saying that you're safe. And also I'm going to check in on you tomorrow. And to reach out to us if you ever need anything, because we just deeply, deeply care about you.
Oh, thanks. And I feel the same way about you guys.
Thanks. Also, just come up to BC and hang out with me. Kat.
Yeah, no, I also have quite a detailed safety plan, which is really useful. I guess I have decided that I'm going to talk about it. So another massive protective factor for me is my sort of found family, and the time most recently I was feeling really suicidal, I actually went and lived with them for 2 weeks, and that was just amazing. that I could just say, like, I'm not okay. And she was just like, well, come and stay with us. And there was a really sweet moment when we were bathing her kids, and one of them just said, "Oh, like, why is Kat here?" And like their dad just said, "Oh, because she is feeling really sad, and she needs to come and be with the people that love her." It's the kind of thing that we probably wouldn't have said so bluntly to each other if we hadn't have been in that situation. And it was just beautiful, and it was so kind of moving to hear in the moment. And now, like, even before then, like, they were my family, but like now that is a big protective factor, even though I have a lot of arguments with myself about it, because it'll be like, well, I don't want them to learn about, feeling suicidal because I do that. And I also I don't want them to be, to have trauma from that. Then I'll have those moments where I feel deeply, deeply irresponsible to have built that relationship with them, knowing that I feel suicidal at times. That is a kind of beautiful, but also really poignant and kind of painful thing, but really amazing at the same time.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Kat.
I just love how that was all modelled out in front of us, and Kat kind of summed it up there where she said, "Oh, I was able to say I'm not okay." And I think that's a really important thing, like Dave saying, "I've had a rough week," and you saying, "Okay, I'm going to check in on you tomorrow." And Kat saying, "Oh, I'm not okay. I'm going to come and stay with you." This is how friggin' easy it is.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
I know it's more complex, but this is how it starts, with these tiny little things. I'm not okay, and making that be okay. I really hope that there is just a time where you meet at the school gate at pickup time and someone says, "Hi, how are you going?" And you say, "I'm not okay." And that is completely okay.
Totally.
I think that is where we change this. Good thanks should be removed from vocabulary. We shouldn't be allowed to say it.
I will often say to people, I'll be like, "Oh, how are you?" They're like, "Good." And I go like, "That's not very convincing." And then usually they open back up. I do it all the time at work. Poor people at work. I'm always like, "That wasn't convincing," because I know they're not good. And then they'll inevitably say what's actually wrong, and we have a conversation about it.
I've started being like radically honest with people, because I'm just like, no, I need to be authentic. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Love it.
Mostly people take it well. But I'm also very guilty of being one of those people that, like, a lot of people know that I have struggled, but not many people will know when I'm struggling.
Right. Yes. It's always like kind of historical. Yeah, it's a good point. I'll do mine and then we should wrap up because I really have to pee and this has already been 2 hours. But I think for me, my protective factors are stuff like this conversation. I know for a fact that we're changing people's lives right now and saving people's lives right now. And that is not me being like hyperbolic or grandiose or anything like that. I get messages from people from all over the world saying that this kind of conversation is changing their life and saving their life. And to me, that is beyond me, right? That is a thing that is not about me at all. That's a thing that's about creating space for conversation. And so if I were to die tomorrow, I can't guarantee that somebody else would just take over that space. When I in this last summer, when I was very much dying or gonna die at any moment, and I recorded a suicide note, it talked about super feelers for half of it because it's that much of a thing. And it was like, please don't let this die with me, And the other piece, I think, is I know I would devastate so many people. I don't think my dad would never get over it. My dad would die, I think, with me. And a lot of my friends would never be able to be the same. And Aaron, of course, would be devastated, and all of you would be devastated. And I try and remind myself that, like, this is beyond me. I have to think about the consequences on others, which is maybe not the best factor, but it does help. And then honestly, proving people wrong. I do not want to be 1 in 10. And if anybody's listening to this and they want to be the 1 in 10, or they feel like they have no choice but be the 1 in 10, I understand that, and I'm sorry, and I feel for you. And life is so freaking hard, and I do not blame anybody for dying by suicide ever. I think that there is no person in the universe that ever does that for any reason other than it felt like there was no other option. But there are other options most of the time. And if it feels like there aren't, please give yourself 48 hours because, the feelings often go away, not always, often, or get better. And I just never want somebody to make that decision rashly. I don't remember if I've talked about it on this podcast before or not, but
Lori, can I add on?
Yeah,
quick?
yeah, please.
So give yourself 48 hours, but like also talk to somebody. I think in every example that, that we have given here, we have talked about connection in some way, shape, or form, whether it's with animals or whether it's with people. So give yourself 48 hours and talk to somebody.
Yeah, thanks, Shane.
I'm always open to messages from people.
Mm-hmm. Totally. How do I say this? I am always open to messages from people, but I am not a crisis line. And I think that is a really hard boundary to have. And it's not because I don't care. It's because I also need to stay alive myself. There are crisis lines for those moments. And if you message me, I will respond, but it will not be responded to in a timely manner because I want to give everybody the response that they deserve and also keep myself safe in the process. The thing that I don't know if I've talked about on this show before, but it's a memory that will never leave me, unfortunately. Or maybe it's good because it's motivation. As you guys know, my family has a very complex relationship with each other. And I've been suicidal for a very, very, very long time. And I'm honestly, suicide is always the first thing that comes to my mind when anything bad happens, every single time. And that's something I would love to talk more about when it's not been 2 hours, but maybe on a self-harm episode, that's just my go-to. When I was 19-ish, I got kicked out of my house and the police came, took my keys, and I never went back. But when I say I never went back, I mean I never went back to live there. Eventually, I had to go back because I had driving lessons scheduled. I had failed my driving test twice already, and so I had a couple lessons to just kind of prep me for the test. And they were based from my mom's house. That was the address that they were gonna pick me up from, but I had been kicked out. So I went there just enough time to basically get in the car for the driving lesson and then go. And it had been the first time I had been back since I had been kicked out. And I do not blame my mom for kicking me out, for the record. That was something that she needed to do to stay safe. And that is, honestly, it was a turning point in my life that was positive. However, so I got kicked out in December, and I don't know when Mother's Day is. May, something like that, March. Anyways, it had been Mother's Day. And I was just kind of poking around in the house, and I was sitting in the living room and saw a Mother's Day card from my sister that had, flowers and butterflies and all sorts of bullshit on it. And the inside of the card, and it was proudly presented on the mantelpiece. And in the card, it said, "Mom, I'm so happy to see how happy you are now that Lori's gone." And as a person who has always been suicidal, who has always felt as though the world would be better off without me, and then to see those words written, not only written, also written and then proudly displayed on a mantle, covered in flowers and rainbows and butterflies and all that bullshit, was the hardest thing I'd ever read, because it was solidifying all of the things that I thought about what would happen if I died, is that everybody would be better off without me. And while they weren't talking about me dying, they were talking about me not living there anymore and not being in their lives. I do feel like that could have been the exact same card had I died. And I am also dedicated to proving that fucking bitch wrong. That was a long ass time ago. That was over 12 years ago. And I will not let that card be written to my mother or to anybody else in the world after I die by suicide, because I don't want to give them the satisfaction. So that is yet
And
another
you're amazing,
reason.
and like we wouldn't be here without you. Like I wouldn't be here
Thank
without you. I'll say that bluntly. Like that's a fact.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, I love you guys so much. Anyways, I wanted to end on that little story because I think that story says a lot about how to not be a helpful family member. That's the kind of card you throw away, in my opinion. And I care about you all so much, and the world would be such a worse place without any of you. So please stay alive, including all of those who are listening. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your guys' stories. We're almost done the full regular episodes of symptoms that are in the DSM, but we're gonna do a couple extras. So things like self-harm, we're gonna separate from suicide, it sounds like, because this has been quite a healthy discussion, shall we say. And then there's a few others that the European model uses to diagnose that I think are interesting and not in the DSM. So I'd love to have conversations about those as well. So have a wonderful weekend, you guys. I love you so much, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks when we record next. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, and you get bonus content, extra resources, and extra connection to me throughout. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again, and have a great day.